Right now, you are warm. You probably haven't thought about that once today. The temperature in your room is controlled, your food is stored, your shelter is permanent. You have never, not even once, had to solve the problem of staying alive through a winter with nothing but your hands and the people standing next to you. Your ancestors had to solve that problem every single day for over 100,000 years. This is not a story about a bad season. This is not a harsh winter that passed by spring. The last glacial maximum, the peak of the most recent ice age, locked the planet inside a frozen grip that lasted from roughly 26,000 years ago to about 19,000 years ago. Ice sheets, nearly 2 miles thick, buried what is now Canada, Scandinavia, and northern Europe entirely. Global temperatures were 10 to 12 degrees Celsius colder than today. Sea levels were 400 feet lower because so much of the planet's water was locked into ice. The Sahara, which struggles to support life today, was even more barren then. The habitable land on Earth shrank to a fraction of what exists now, and your ancestors were already living on it. Not in the margins, not barely surviving. They were hunting, making tools, burying their dead, and painting animals on cave walls while the ice closed in around them. The question is not whether they survived. We know they did, because you exist. The question is, how? And the answer changes what you think you know about what human beings actually are. The first problem was the cold itself. At the peak of the Ice Age, winters across Europe and Central Asia were not uncomfortable. They were lethal. Temperatures regularly dropped to -20 or -30 degrees Celsius in the open landscape. Wind chill pushed that further. A human body exposed to those conditions without protection dies within hours. Your core temperature drops, your extremities shut down, your heart slows, and then stops. Your ancestors had no wool mills, no synthetic insulation, no Gore-Tex. What they had was everything else. Archaeologists excavating sites across Russia, Ukraine, and Central Europe have found evidence of tailored clothing dating back at least 30,000 years. Not wrapped hides, tailored clothing. Stitched, fitted, layered garments assembled from the skins of Arctic fox, wolf, mammoth, and reindeer. Bone needles thin enough to thread sinew through have been recovered from sites across Siberia. These were not crude coverings. They were engineered solutions. Researchers who have reconstructed Ice Age clothing using only period-accurate tools estimate they would have provided thermal protection comparable to modern Arctic expedition gear. The shelter came next. In regions where wood was scarce, which was most of the open steppe where the megafauna lived, your ancestors built structures from the only large material available, mammoth bones. Sites like Mezherik in Ukraine, excavated in the 1960s, revealed circular dwellings built from the interlocked bones and tusks of dozens of mammoths. The structures were likely covered with hides and held in place with heavy stones. Inside, hearths burned consistently. Researchers analyzing the ash layers found in these sites identified bone as the primary fuel. When wood was unavailable, they burned the bones of the animals they had already eaten. They used everything. Nothing was wasted, because nothing could be. Fire was not optional. Fire was the entire strategy. A hearth inside a mammoth bone shelter, burning steadily through a night at -25 degrees, was the difference between waking up and not waking up. Archaeological sites from this period show hearths that burned for extended periods. Not casual fires, but maintained, managed heat sources that someone was responsible for feeding through the night. That responsibility changed social structure. Somebody had to stay awake. Somebody had to gather the fuel. Somebody had to know when the fire was dying before it actually died. The fire created roles, and roles created obligations, and obligation deepened the bonds that held the group together. A group that could maintain a fire through a 1-4-hour winter night was a group that trusted each other with their lives, every single night. The second problem was food. The Ice Age landscape was not empty. It was full of some of the largest animals that have ever walked the earth. Woolly mammoths standing 11 feet tall at the shoulder. Cave lions twice the size of modern African lions. Woolly rhinoceroses. Giant deer with antler spans of 12 feet. Steppe bison. Cave bears weighing over 1,500 pounds. Your ancestors hunted all of them. Not with firearms, not with metal, with spears tipped with flint or bone, with traps dug into frozen ground, with coordinated group strategies that required planning, communication, and trust extended across time. You cannot plan a mammoth hunt with people you don't speak to regularly. You cannot execute it with people you don't trust completely. The hunt itself was a social contract signed in risk. Every man who stepped into position around a wounded mammoth was betting his life that the men on the other side of the animal would hold their position too. A single mammoth kill could provide enough meat, fat, hide, and bone to sustain a group of 25 people for weeks. The fat was especially critical. In extreme cold, the human body burns calories at a rate that plant foods alone cannot sustain. Fat from megafauna was not a preference. It was survival arithmetic. Groups that could reliably access fat-rich megafauna made it through winters that killed everything else. But the megafauna were disappearing. As the ice began to retreat around 15,000 years ago, the open steppe that had supported the great herds began to fragment into forests. The animals animals that had defined the Ice Age diet began to vanish. Some from climate change, some from overhunting, probably both. Entire food systems that groups had built their survival around collapsed within a few generations. Your ancestors had to adapt again. They shifted towards smaller game, fish, birds, and coastal shellfish. They followed river systems. They moved into territories that had been locked under ice for thousands of years and were only now becoming livable. Groups that had lived in one region for millennia picked up everything they owned, which still fit in a single bag, and relocated. This is when something else happened. The Ice Age did not just test human bodies. It tested human societies. Groups that cooperated survived. Groups that fractured did not. Anthropologists studying the genetics of modern human populations have found evidence of severe population bottlenecks during the Ice Age peak. The total number of breeding humans on the entire planet may have dropped to as few as 10,000 individuals at certain points. 10,000 people, fewer than fill a mid-sized concert venue. That is the entire genetic origin of every human being alive today. The ones who made it through were not the strongest individuals. They were the best groups. And then there were the Neanderthals. They had lived in Europe for over 200,000 years before modern humans arrived. They were physically more robust than us, with wider bodies built for cold retention, barrel chests that held heat more efficiently, and larger brains by volume. They controlled fire. They made tools. There is evidence they cared for their injured and buried their dead. They had survived multiple glacial cycles before this one. By every visible measure, they were equipped for the cold in ways modern humans were not. They were gone by 40,000 years ago. The exact cause is still debated among researchers. Climate pressure played a role. Direct competition with modern humans played a role. Interbreeding happened too, which is why most people alive today carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA. But the leading hypothesis for why they disappeared as a distinct population comes down to something harder to see in the fossil record: social scale. Modern humans maintained larger, more connected networks than Neanderthals did. We traded across longer distances. We shared information between groups that had never met face to face. The evidence is sitting in the archaeology. Modern human tools from this period regularly contain materials sourced hundreds of miles from where they were found. Neanderthal tools were almost always made from stone, available within 20 miles of the site. Their world was local. Ours was networked. When conditions got bad enough that local resources failed, the network held us up. When the same thing happened to the Neanderthals, there was no network. What the Ice Age left inside you is not ancient history. It is running right now. Your body's drive to store fat during times of abundance is an Ice Age survival program. The reason you feel instinctively safer in a warm enclosed space with familiar people than alone in open ground is an Ice Age survival program. The reason humans under stress pull together faster and bond more intensely than humans in comfort is an Ice Age survival program. The reason a power outage in winter produces a feeling of alarm that seems disproportionate to the actual danger is your nervous system running a calculation it learned 20,000 years ago and has never been told to stop. The cold shaped everything. The tailored clothing, the bone shelters, the managed fire, the coordinated hunts, the long-distance trading networks, the deepened social bonds. Everything that makes human civilization recognizable today has a thread that pulls back to a group of people sitting inside a structure built from mammoth bones, feeding a fire through a 14-hour winter night in a landscape buried under ice that would not retreat for another 10,000 years. You are warm right now because they figured it out. And somewhere underneath every comfort you have never had to earn, your body still remembers exactly how close the whole thing came to not working out at all.